But with that, we're going to finish our series this week on talking about what would Jesus undo. The whole idea was if Jesus came to earth right now and looked at us and wanted to help untangle some things in our lives and maybe correct some things or perspectives, the question would be, what would he undo? What would he challenge us with? And if you remember the very first week, we talked about spiritual indifference, the idea of being indifferent towards the things of God. He would definitely challenge us to make sure the kingdom of God was a priority. The next week we talked about the one that nobody likes to talk about, hypocrisy. He would probably undo hypocrisy in our lives because we all at some level struggle with being hypocrites. And he reserved, if you remember, his harshest words for those who were hypocrites in life. He really challenged them to be faithful to what they know to be true. And then last week we talked about the whole idea of comparison, because one of the things that ruins our joy and our contentment in life is when we compare ourselves to others. And so Jesus would say, hey, stop that. Stop comparing. Don't do that. Let what I provide for you be enough for you. And so this week we're going to look at the last thing I think he would really want us to talk about. It's probably a difficult topic at times, but we're going to tackle it. In John chapter 18, verse 37, notice these words. This is when Pilate was cross-examining Jesus about who he was and what was going on. And it says, "You are a king then," said Pilate. And Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." And then notice what Pilate says in response. What is truth? What is truth? That's a big question today. What is truth? There's a lot of opinions about truth, lots of people who are going around saying, I have my truth, you have your truth. So what is truth? And I think Jesus would like us to untangle that mess in our lives so that we know what truth really is. So we're going to spend some time talking about that today. So to get started, what is truth? Let's define truth for you, okay? Just give you a dictionary definition. Truth is the true or actual state of a matter, conformity with fact or reality, a verified or indisputable fact, proposition, principle, or the like. Truth is factual and truth is indisputable. Whether you agree with the truth or not, this might be another story, but it is factual, it's indisputable, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. It doesn't change, but in our society today, I would say that we struggle with this. We struggle with the idea of truth. In fact, I think we look at truth through two different lenses in society today. We look at what I would call absolute truth, and we look at what I would call relative truth. So absolute truth, what is that? Absolute truth is true regardless of how a person thinks or feels about it. A truth is absolute, irrespective of how you think or feel about it. And again, that's where we hear it in society to say, I have my truth, you have your truth. I don't know if that's really true because I don't like what that truth might imply, and we will struggle with it. But no, truth is indisputable. Truth is true regardless of how you feel about it, like the fact and the truth that Jesus is Lord. Now, there's a ton of people in the world that will say that. I don't agree with that. I don't believe that. But does that change the fact? No, he is still Lord, whether you like it or not. In fact, one day he says, whether you believe it or not, every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that I am Lord. You're going to be brought to that point in life sooner or later, whether you believe it or not, whether you think it's true or not, it is still true. It's a fact that you can't deny. It's an absolute truth. And we'll argue about it, we'll debate its veracity, we'll give our opinions, we will give our justifications for how we feel about it, but does that change anything? No. It's simply the truth. Then there's relative truth. Relative truth simply says relative truth is the belief truth changes based on an individual's understanding of it. So in other words, truth can morph, it can change, it can be massaged, it can be different based on how I think about it, which puts us kind of in the driver's seat about truth. And so then it becomes very, very subjective. With relative truth, there are no absolutes, okay? And what may be true for you simply may not be true for me. And I find that really interesting because when you make a statement that there is no such thing as absolute truth, you're making a truth statement that in and of itself can't be made, because if there's no absolute truth, you can't say there is no absolute truth because you could be wrong about that particular statement. So we struggle with this. And for generations now, we've been dealing with truth on that kind of level and trying to figure out what really is truth. You have your truth, I have mine. This is what I believe, this is what you believe. And the problem with relative truth is just a simple contradiction of terms. Truth can't be relative by definition. It's either absolute or it's not. It can't be one or the other. It's either truth or it's not truth. One or the other is that way. And if truth is factual and indisputable, then you can't have two different truths about something. You can't. And so this is kind of the world Jesus also entered. It's the world that we live in today with trying to figure that all out. There's a lot of pressure on us in society today to lean one way or the other, or to agree with one thing or another. But to do that, I think we really need to understand some more things about truth. So what are some of the characteristics of real truth? First, truth is a constant. It does not change. Okay? It is a constant and does not change. Circumstances may change, but the truth doesn't change. Like gravity is a truth for us, right? And if you try to violate that truth, it will break you, okay? You can't deny it. It's a reality. It's a truth. There is gravity. It does have an impact on our lives. It doesn't change. It's an absolute thing if you live on this planet. Whether you agree with gravity or not, whether you think you can fly or not, all of that stuff is irrelevant. No matter what circumstance you find yourself in, what goes up must come down, okay? That's just a truth. We deal with that truth and live with it every day. It's a constant thing. It can't be changed based on circumstances. And then there's the idea that truth is objective. People sometimes think truth is subjective, but no, truth is objective. It plays absolutely no favorites. What is true for you is true for me, and what is true for them is true for me as well. If this is a truth that is true for every single person, regardless of how we feel about it. It is not objective. It doesn't matter what you think about it or where your standard comes from. Truth is truth is truth. It doesn't change. It's constant and it's objective. And so if it affects you one way, it will also affect me the same way. If it applies to you, it also applies to me. Want simple examples of that? What about our laws? If you speed, do you deserve a speeding ticket if you get caught? Yes, you do, right? Otherwise, why would we have speed limits? And why we would have people to enforce them? It's the same for you, it's the same for me. Now, don't get into, I don't know if justice is equally applied. I'm not talking about that. We are all under the same standard. We all have that truth that if you break the law, there is a punishment for breaking the law. Okay, so we understand that. It is not subjective. I can't tell a police officer, that doesn't apply to me because I have excuses for what I'm doing. No, it's objective. You broke the law, there is a punishment that goes with it. Okay? Also, truth, this is interesting, truth will prevail. Okay? It will be standing in the end. That's the neat thing about truth. Whether you agree with it or disagree with it, in the end, truth will always rule out. As Christians, I think we often find ourselves feeling like we have this responsibility to defend the truth. Well, we might want to, but the reality is ultimately the truth wins, no matter what. Just like I said, the truth of Jesus' statement that every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess. You can go through your whole life saying, I don't believe that. I don't think God would do that. You can deny it. You can justify how you feel about it and disagree with Jesus all you want. But I will guarantee you this, because it's true, on Judgment Day, that's going to happen. Every knee will bow, and every tongue will confess that He is Lord. It's just how it is. You can't argue with it, even if you want to. You're going to realize that sooner or later, when that time comes, truth will win. It always wins. It's always found out to be true. And now realize, truth is different than facts. Believe it or not, facts can change. When I went to school, when I was a kid, we were taught about the solar system. We had 9 planets in our solar system, and the furthest planet was called Pluto. And I was taught that it was a planet. Now we know, because of modern technology and satellites that we've sent out and pictures that have been taken, that it is not a planet by definition. So that fact in my life changed. But did that change what Pluto was? Pluto's been the same all along. It has never changed. Get this in your mind, that even though my facts might change, even though what I think about it might change, even though my beliefs might change, Truth doesn't change. That body that's hanging out in space has always been the same and will always be the same, and the truth is it's Pluto, period. Okay? Just because my facts don't measure up. I mean, if you work in the medical field, facts change all the time. I mean, I remember when I went to school and was trained and I took all my biology classes, there's things now that directly contradict what I was taught as fact. But did it change the truth about what that is? No. That truth was still the same. That's why the facts changed to line up with the truth of what was really happening in the body. So realize that about truth, it is that constant thing. It is an objective thing. It's something that will never change. And in the end, truth always wins. It will always prevail. And time is probably the greatest ally to truth, because in time, truth will will out. And for many of us, we have these opportunities in life, and I want to call them defining moments when we are confronted with truth. In fact, I put it this way in your handout. A defining moment, I would say it this way, is a time when we are confronted with the truth that if we embrace it, it has the potential to transform our life forever. When we are confronted with the truth, it has this potential, if we will yield to that truth, to transform us forever. Like a truth someone presents to us, we immediately sometimes know that that's true. Have you ever had that happen to you? Somebody's talking to you and they reveal something to you and you go, oh, I knew that. That's true, isn't it? And you can choose to accept or reject what's being said, but it can impact your life in a very powerful way. Or a truth that we were raised with has become an inconvenient truth, and it interferes with our life. And we're confronted with what will we do with that truth. Right? I believed it when I was a kid. I don't know if I can believe it as an adult, but I know in my heart that it's true. Now, what do you do with that? That's a defining moment for you to decide what is true, what is not, based on what you see in front of you, and then respond to that truth. Or sometimes a truth that we have to wrestle with is one because we're so busy we've lost sight of it. And you know this happens in life. There's things that you know to be true because life gets busy, life gets complicated, you get distracted. That truth takes second seat to other things. It's still true, and there's this moment where you're confronted with, you go, oh, someone either tells you about it, somebody brings it to your attention, any of these things, and all of a sudden that truth lands right back in your lap again. That's a defining moment for you. What will you do when you are presented with that truth? And I've shared it before in church. I had my defining moment once in my marriage years ago when my wife and I were struggling, and we went and saw a marriage counselor, and he gave us some books that I use now today in marriage counseling as well. Gary Smalley wrote 2 really great books. One is called For Better or For Best. It's a book that helps the man understand what a woman would want her to know about women. And the other book is called, For Better or For Best is for the woman. If Only He Knew is the one for the man. And so I'll hand those out in counseling because I remember the defining moment I had. My wife and I were struggling. This is years ago. I thought I was fine. I thought she was all messed up. Isn't that how it goes, right? And, we finally decided to go to counseling. I said, oh, okay, well, you probably need it. So we went to counseling, and he gave us that book to read, and I'm reading it. And at this time, I was working at the INL, and I was riding home on the bus that day with a guy sitting next to me. It's chapter 4 or 5 of the book. I can't remember exactly where. And it said, if there are problems after 5 years of marriage, if there's problems in the relationship, it is likely due to the man's insensitivity to the woman. Well, that's an inconvenient statement. Because what that just did, it says it's really my fault. And all of a sudden, the reality of what was going on in my marriage, the truth that I didn't want to listen to, which I wanted to blame her for it and say I was just fine, hit me right between the eyes, and I literally began to weep in my seat. The guy next to me is looking at me like, what is going on here? Guys, tears running down my eyes, and I'm just overwhelmed with this truth. It was a defining moment. And because I allowed it to penetrate my heart, that truth, it transformed me as a husband. Not perfect today. I don't think anybody is perfect as a spouse. But I am not the man I was before then. And I am much more what my wife wants me to be now. And that was that moment in my life where that kind of come to Jesus meeting people talk about, where that truth just grabbed my heart and changed me. And that's why truth is so important to Jesus, because of the power of truth. Okay? But there's a reality. There are some truths we don't want to know. Let's be honest. There are some things we don't want to hear the truth about. One of the things for parents is we sometimes don't want to hear the truth about our kids. I mean, come on, sometimes you know what I'm talking about. You're going, oh, that can't be true of my child. My child would never do that. But in the back of your mind going, oh, I can't believe they did that. But you're denying it at the same time. It's an inconvenient truth. You don't want to hear it, but we struggle with it. Or maybe you're single and you so desperately want to find love and you're now dating someone, and all of a sudden information about that person starts to come in. Oh, no, they're not like that. I don't believe that. And even in the face of fact, you will deny the truth because you so much don't want to hear it. You don't want to know the truth, so you don't listen to it. Or in your marriage, there's red flags going up all over the place, you know. Oh, no, we're just fine. Everybody goes through difficult times, blah, blah, blah. And we don't want to hear the truth. I've seen it in business. You get bad news, you're going, oh, hopefully that'll pass, right? And you don't address it until it's too late. We have these opportunities, yet it's kind of irrational that we know that something is true and we won't listen to it. Isn't that strange that we do that? That we know something is true, yet we choose to ignore that truth. And then what happens? If we sometimes ignore it long enough, we believe somehow that truth will disappear. But the thing about truth is what happens over time. Truth always shows itself. It always wins. That's why even in Scripture it says your sin will find you out. The truth is, sooner or later, things get exposed. Something happens. Okay? And if we ignore the truth about God, which I think many of us struggle with, that never leads to a good place either. And knowing the reality about your family or yourself or your relationships can destroy couples. It can implode families. You can lose businesses over ignoring the truth. You can almost also damage yourself by ignoring the truth about God. And what He says is true based on what we want to believe is true. And what I want to believe about God runs head on with what is true about God, I have one of those defining moments. Will I receive the truth, or will I make excuses and ignore it? And so Jesus walks into this world. That's the world He walked into. Same world that we live in today. And what happens for many of us is because we have this conflict with what we want to believe is true based on what is true, we kind of have a God according to me attitude, right? Like statements like this, my God will make up for my bad choices because He knows I have a good heart. I mean, He knows I'm a good guy, so it's going to be okay. Or, my God won't care if I do this just once. I'll never do it again. Okay, well, we can talk ourselves into things. Or, my God doesn't care about my particular sins. He's got bigger fish to fry. By the way, look at my neighbor, right? We can believe those things. Or, my God won't be so hard-nosed on Judgment Day. He loves everybody, and He's really just a softie. Those things are interesting. You know, I hear that so much today. Well, God is a God of love. Yes, He is a God of love. He's also a God of justice. There's two sides to that coin. And we don't want to hear the inconvenient side, which is the justice side, but we want to hear the love side. Or, my God wants me to be happy. And so it's okay if I pursue happiness the way I want to pursue it. And so we redefine God instead of looking at the truth about God. Now, not that God is awful to look at the truth. There are just some things that run up against that. Things that we might find in society that society says this is true, but God says, I'm sorry, that isn't true. What are you going to do with those things? And it's not that we don't want to believe in truth. We just don't want to believe it's true. Is that really true? I don't want to believe that, because if it does, that means maybe I have to change. Maybe there's something that's some responsibility I have here. Maybe, like it was for me, I need to accept the reality I haven't been such a great husband, and I got to do something about that. But it's inconvenient. It's difficult at times, and so we can know it's true, but we don't want to believe that it's true. But when that happens, there's a problem. The problem is this: that with every distortion of truth about God, there's a corresponding negative consequence. Every time we distort the truth about who God is, there is a negative consequence towards us. Like, for example, If you believe every time something bad happens to you, God is punishing you, then you'll never trust him. You're going to think, oh, he's out to get me all the time. But there are people that believe that is true. Okay? Or if you have a routine in your life that you believe honors God, then somehow he'll leave you alone. And he'll never, if that's true, then you'll never have a personal relationship with him because you're making it all about you. That's the negative. Or have you ever, if you have to have every single, and I hear this so often, every single question answered before you can come to faith in Jesus, you will never have a relationship with him. Ever. Just won't happen. You'll never find peace. You'll never find true understanding or contentment if you believe every question needs to be answered. Or that, this one I hear all the time, that, if you believe that God heals all illnesses, then you're setting yourself up for a lifetime of disappointment. Because he's never promised that. He never promised that. If you say, well, he doesn't need my skills and my gifts and my talents and my finance, he doesn't really need that. Look, God's got everything, and there's plenty of people for doing everything. You will never, never know what it's like to surrender to God and be used by him to the fullest. You'll never experience that if you have this misbelief about who God is. Okay, laugh. Okay, got to have a little fun once in a while, right? For those of you who are online, obviously we were having technical difficulties, and I'm the technical difficulty. Okay, I'll own that. I forgot to do what I was supposed to do, change batteries. Anyway, as we get back to this, as we talk about those things that we might believe and the negative consequence of it, we were talking about people that if they try to get to heaven on their own merit, that I can earn my